But what I know now is that that child being removed from that family and brought into our system, even when they're placed with nice people, and I'm a relatively nice human being, is hugely traumatic for the child. And what we've learned from young people who've grown up and had the experience of being foster care is that they would have loved for us to rescue their family rather than trying to rescue them from their family. And so what we know now is if we can wrap services and supports around families to create safety within the family, that is the best thing to do. And ideally, can we solve the problems that are occurring with that child's parents first and keep them safely at home? And if not, can we keep them connected by getting them with a relative or a member of their community that is kin to them so that they don't experience the kinds of loss and grief that happen when they come into foster care?
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Heart and Hustle podcast. Now, I'm incredibly excited to be able to share the heart and hustle of this amazing leader and CEO who sits across this digital table with me. Today, we're going to be learning about Lori Ross, the CEO of Foster Adopt Connect. Now, we're going to hear about her personal experience as a young 20-something that led her down this path. We're going to talk about the changing landscape of child welfare and so much more. Lori, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Lori, I think it's really important for us to kind of get off on a tone, if you will, for Heart and Hustle. How's your heart doing today?
It's big and full and excited about good things that can happen.
That's an amazing way to be an optimist, right, about what's happening. We're recording this in mid-December 2024. 2025 is right around the corner. What are you most excited about as we kind of get into the next year here?
Well, I'm not done with this year yet. So right now I'm excited about the work that we're doing, serving thousands of kids in Missouri and Kansas for Christmas. So we have our Give Joy program going on right now, and we're getting ready to hand out a whole lot of holiday smiles to a whole lot of kids. And that always just makes me excited and happy at the end of the year.
How long have you guys been doing the Give Joy program? How long has this been something going on?
Well, we've been around about 25 years, and I think we've been probably doing it maybe 18 or 19 of those years. And as we grow in different locations in our two states, the number of kids we serve grows right along with it.
Wow. I mean, doesn't it feel good to be able to be somebody in the community who's giving back to so many people and making so many fundamental memories for their life?
Yeah, it really is cool. And what's I think even cooler is that it is a real direct way that people in the community can do something that really impacts the life of a child. I mean, everybody thinks they would like to make a difference for kids who suffered abuse and neglect, and this is a way to, actually directly give them something that they are excited about getting for the holidays, and I love being able to connect the community to those opportunities.
So what was the story that kind of brought us to be the individual who sits across this table for me here today? How does one support thousands of children, helps so many individuals? How do we kind of get down this path?
Well, I am a person who had a fantastic mom. My mom did everything in the world for me and my sister, bent over backwards, raised us for a large part of our life on her own, and never ever ceased to make me know that I was loved and treasured. And I had a friend in high school who had an experience with her mom, and it involved some abuse. And I remember at the time thinking it just shocked me. It was just shocking. And I remember at the time thinking, I want to do something that makes a difference for kids like my friend. And so that eventually led to hearing an ad on a radio one day that the state of Kansas was looking for people to be foster parents. And I was 20 and newly married, and had no reason in the world to think I would qualify. Lived in an apartment, so I thought, what could it hurt to pick up the phone and call? And so I made that phone call, and they said, "Oh, yeah, you would qualify. Why don't we bring you into an orientation and teach you all about it?" And so I had a long conversation with my husband at dinner that night, and he was like, he kind of was like, okay, whatever, whatever you think. Well, and before he knew it, we had a 6-year old living with us. So just happened that fast.
Wow. I mean, like, what is that process like of being a young 20-year-old, 21-year-old, right? Applying to be a foster parent and then having a 6-year-old child be given to you guys for protection and to be raised? Like, what was that experience like being so young, especially too?
So I was so young that I did not realize how far in over my head I was. I mean, I had all of the bombacity of youth. I did not realize that I did not know anything, and I didn't realize that I couldn't do anything. So it really was, wow, this is cool. I get to do something that's really life changing and get involved. And then when she moved in, she was our biggest teacher. Like from day one, we were learning. Uh, we were her sixth placement. She had been in multiple placements. She had a very tragic history of abuse and a lot of accompanying behaviors and challenges that came with that. But one of her issues was a speech delay, and so, for example, the word milk, instead of saying "I want milk," she would say "mook." And so we had a baby of our own who wasn't quite a year old, learning to talk. And so I just did the same thing with her that I did with our baby, and would say milk, say it slowly with me. And within like 2 months, 3 months, she had eliminated her speech problems just by doing that. So I thought like I had discovered the cure for cancer or invented sliced bread. I was like, dude, I got this. I'm good. And I still had no idea how much I didn't have it. But we plugged away like that month after month, year after year. And eventually she taught us pretty much everything we needed to know. And not only for her, but for all of the kids that came after.
Wow. So ignorance truly was bliss in the very beginning of
It
recognizing.
was, yeah. Looking back now, I would never in a million years have licensed myself. There's no way. But
I mean, if we think about the results of somebody believing in you and licensing you as a young 20 something, the impact that you've been able to have on so many lives. So obviously they saw something in you that was super important.
they must have, or I don't know. I have no idea. I just think about it now and I think, what was I thinking? I have children that are that age and older, and oh my God, there's no way somebody that age is ready to take this on. But I guess
You're the living
I'm
proof.
living proof that some of us can.
So we have our personal experience, right, in adopting a child, but then we also later create Foster Adopt Connect. So what is the inspiration behind that?
Well, after we had been fostering for a number of years, I think we had been fostering like over a decade. We started to recognize that there were issues within the system that were difficult to find resources for kids, difficult issues to overcome, a lot of things we didn't know the answers to. That now that you have to recognize, this was back in the days before the internet. Imagine that. So you couldn't just say, "Hey Siri, find me the answer to this," or Google everything. You had to actually, find the right person to call, get them to answer the phone. It was hard to navigate systems. And I was looking for something in a way with other people to create some level of support for families. And I got involved with a support group, which led to some brainstorming. And a group of us got together and came up with this one stop shop idea where people who were trying to do the work we were trying to do could find a whole bunch of answers just by coming to one place. And that eventually led to us writing our 501c3 at my kitchen table and sending it off with $500 that we rounded up from family and friends. And amazingly enough, the government gave us that 501c3, and we started, finding a place to provide services from and growing an organization.
I mean, this is one the beautiful things I love about the founder's story is when we have a personal experience, we have almost like an aha moment where we recognize there's a gigantic gap in the marketplace of services or support that we can actually provide for people. So what were some of those early conversations like when you said, I think we're really going to start a 501c3 here and start tackling this problem that we've all been experiencing?
Things as basic as not being able to access support from each other. Back in those days, you may have, four foster parents who are in your elementary school attendance area, and you don't know any of those other people. There's no way for you to interact with them. There is no way to be able to find anybody who can offer you back the same kind of support that you can offer to them. So that was one thing, connecting people to each other. Access to resources that could benefit everybody was another thing. Education. And then as we got to know people and got in the door, and they joined us for a training or something like that, we discovered that there was a significant issue around the need to know what the rules were that we were playing by. Like, how does this system actually work? And what are the policies and procedures? Because, somebody would quote something to you and you'd be like, where is that written down? I don't see it anywhere. Nothing was online. There was no online.
Wow.
So, one of the first things we did was order all of the 3-ring binders full of policies that govern child welfare. And I got 8 3-inch 3-ring binders that were mailed in a huge box, pulled those out and started reading through them. And then they sent updated policies by mail every month as the policies were updated. So when people were asking us questions, we could answer their questions, and we knew what are the rules that people have to play by. And that's just one system. Foster care involves lots of systems. You have court systems and educational systems and healthcare systems and mental health systems. So it was a whole lot of recognizing how much we didn't know and trying to figure out what to do.
I still feel like people don't know the real reason why so many children find themselves in foster care in the first place. In our previous conversation, you said, normally there's a narrative in society that says like both of someone's parents passed away in a car crash.
Right.
Is that how individual children are coming into the foster care system?
Almost never. That's almost never the case. In those circumstances, there's almost always family members that step up for those kids. There's a backup plan that the parents have put into place, or they have relatives or family members. What happens is that kids come into foster care largely because of abuse or neglect, and neglect is a big category. So we see a whole lot of people coming into foster care, even back then, but as a result of mental health issues that they, people have self-medicated by using substances, so substance abuse, mental health issues, domestic violence issues. Those kinds of things are things that lead to conditions in which kids are either abused or neglected. And then you have the smaller number of people that are seriously physically abused or seriously sexually abused. And of course, those are just tragic situations, but that's why kids come into care. It's not usually that there's a poor orphan that needs care. That's not it.
Well, my question for you is the best answer always removing the child from the household?
No, I used to think that. That's something that I used to think. I and a lot of people used to think that saving the child from the bad situation is the way you make a difference. And that truly is how I felt 25 years ago. But what I know now is that that child being removed from that family and brought into our system, even when they're placed with nice people, and I'm a relatively nice human being, is hugely traumatic for the child. And what we've learned from young people who've grown up and had the experience of being foster care is that they would have loved for us to rescue their family rather than trying to rescue them from their family. And so what we know now is if we can wrap services and supports around families to create safety within the family, that is the best thing to do. And ideally, can we solve the problems that are occurring with that child's parents first and keep them safely at home? And if not, can we keep them connected by getting them with a relative or a member of their community that is kin to them so that they don't experience the kinds of loss and grief that happen when they come into foster care?
I mean, there's a buzzword that's been thrown around since I've been in the space of healthcare since 2014, which is called whole person care, right? It's not just addressing your physical needs, your emotional needs, your mental health needs, but all of the socioeconomic needs as well.
Right.
And unless you can address all of that as a complete picture of an individual or a family, right, it seems like we're treating the symptom rather than the cause of the actual issue, if that makes sense.
And that is totally the case. If you get in there and you just snatch a child from a bad situation, you may have save that child in that moment, but you've created a host of other problems moving forward. What we need to do as a society is we need to look at all of those issues that are bringing kids into care, and we need to do something about those issues. You're right, poverty, homelessness, transportation issues, substance use issues. Those are the things that are the place in the river where the babies get thrown in, rather than pulling them out. If we can stop them from getting thrown into the river, then we're really making a difference.
You shared some statistics in our last conversation about, substance abuse being a factor in about 90% of child welfare cases. Now, we've seen opioids, fentanyl, drug use, coping skills that have been kind of around all of these types of elements in narcotics over the last couple of years that have been incredibly stressful. Why do you think it's those specifically that have such a huge chunk of the cases that individuals end up being a part of child welfare because of?
I think because what we see is that people try to medicate away their other issues, problems, and concerns. So if you're living in a trauma-filled community where there's stress and violence and things going on around you all the time, self-medicating around that is something that we see very commonly. We definitely see self-medication of any kind of mental health issues or challenges, and and truly that is, I think it is a huge part of almost every case that we see. It's a rare situation if there's not a substance abuse issue involved in addition to whatever the other issues are.
Man, that's got to be incredibly challenging, even from the way in which you engage with an individual child, right, who comes from a majority of these environments. Does that change the perspective in how you engage or how you kind of support a child through this process, knowing that they come from this unstable environment?
Well, I mean, absolutely. Well, first of all, you really have to recognize that people do the best they can in the environment that they're in. So,
Yeah.
not not looking negatively on the way people have chosen to cope with their challenges in life, and instead looking at those. Honestly, I can't look at a social media post that's not a mom having wine at the end of the day because her kids are driving her crazy, right? And that's perfectly acceptable. But we don't recognize then that what we see in the families of the kids we're working with is a similar effort to cope with whatever the stressors are that that family is undergoing. And we recognize that things like substance addiction and alcohol addiction, those are addictions and a disease, but we don't necessarily treat it that way. And then the other piece is that there is nowhere near enough access to help and support and treatment for those issues. And when all you're doing every day is trying to survive because you're living in poverty or a situation, a community that's unsafe, seeking out treatment for those things that make you feel better is not the top of your priority list. It's
100%.
probably how I'm going to keep the roof over my head and how I'm going to get to that job so I don't get fired, that is on your mind. So, I mean, I think recognizing the actual real challenges that human beings are dealing with, that it's our obligation as humans who work within the system to see these people as people just like us who are struggling and trying to find their way.
I mean, the perspective that I have being born in 1990 was I saw the before time, before the internet, before the social media, before the smartphone, right? After the smartphone, I've started in my wiser years of being 34 years old, I've started to become a more of an observer of people around me. And one of the things that is kind of alarming to me deep down in my subconscious is our inability to kind of regulate our emotions
Yeah.
because we spend so much time on these devices. Anytime we feel uncomfortable in a social setting, standing in line at the grocery store, what does everybody do? Pulls out their device, starts getting away, escaping from this moment of instability or this inaccuracy of how we're feeling. Do you ever worry about the macro impacts of access to these little devices
Oh,
on our ability to
100%.
manage our relations? Yeah.
100%. Not only do we escape into them, but we allow our kids to escape into them. We expose our kids to a world that isn't real, that is not reality. We lessen the value of relationships with the actual human beings who can have contact with them. Do you know all of the neighbors in your neighborhood? Because I don't.
Here's a scary statement. I had this conversation on the podcast a couple weeks ago. I don't know the names of any of my neighbors. And I've lived in this house for 2.5 years now, which is terrifying to say. There was a guy on the podcast named Jesus Guerrera, who's the leader of an organization out of Tennessee, I believe. And he said, simple thought experiment. Lori, if you were out of a cup of sugar, would you go to your neighbor and ask for a cup of sugar? Or would you go to the store and go buy new sugar, or have somebody like Postmates or Uber Eats drop it off at your house?
Yeah, I would not go to the neighbor.
Right. And so it's like the layer of convenience is like creating a disconnection in our societies,
100%.
which previous generations would look at us like we're crazy. It's like, why are you going to go to the store when you could just borrow a cup of sugar from Lori, who's your next door neighbor?
Right. And when I was a kid, which was way before you were a kid, the neighbors on my block were my other mothers, and my other fathers. Like, somebody would yell at us to get off the garage roof. And it wasn't my dad yelling at us to get off the garage roof. It was the neighbor's dad. They knew exactly who our parents were. And if we did something dumb, everyone in the neighborhood knew about it. We don't even know our neighbors anymore. So how do we have a community that can look out for kids and wrap families with the supports they need? We are isolated. All of us are way too isolated.
We need more leaders like you, Lori, who can help us understand why it's so important to give love to so many people who need it. Because I think we're all so caught up in our own little worlds of like selfish PR and showing our highlights on social media that we forget to engage with the people who are around us and who actually need our attention.
You don't do that. You don't post on social media what your struggles are. Like, that's not something you put out there. So those folks who are struggling the most are very rarely putting out their I need help. And if they do, God forbid, puts I need help in some neighborhood community group, they get torn up for having the nerve to have an issue or a need.
I know.
It's not a kind world anymore. It's just not.
It's not. So here, let's talk a little bit about the impact that you guys have been able to have over all these years. How many lives have you guys impacted? How many children have you helped find foster homes, get adopted? What does this look like from your guys' perspective?
Thousands and thousands. I think within the last year, we've served about 3,400 kids in the states of Missouri and Kansas and their families. So this is we're in our 25th year of service, and that number, has just grown year over year as we're spreading out geographically. The number of kids that are adopted is different year by year, but it continues to remain steady, several hundred a year. We help facilitate adoptions for. We have added services over time, like we are really invested now in working with families who are at risk of having their kids come into care. So that kind of work is tremendously important to us, and we have very good success getting in there and working side by side with families to prevent their kids from having to come out of their home.
Is that an intervention, or is that like an education engagement process?
It's both. We will walk with them. One of the things we realize is that a lot of people want to pour education at you, but they don't want to actually help you solve the problem. So we get into a home and somebody is struggling and they don't have the furniture they need, or they've got bed bugs in the house, or they actually don't have access to transportation. We're a nonprofit, so we can put a need out on our social media, which has a positive side too, right? And we can, find somebody who will come in. Blue Beetle in our area is a organization that is a company that treats bug stuff. They'll come in every now and then and do a bed bug thing for us at somebody's house for cheap or free. So we can rally community resources to actually help make that difference for that family, walk through their struggles, talk to them about safety, create, not just educate, but walk with them to solve those problems.
Yeah, partnership and collaboration is what people really need. We don't need to be talked at, we need to be talked with and help us navigate this time. Did you ever think that your journey of when you were 21 years old and applying to be a foster mom, did you think that it was going to turn into the element of you creating this business 25 plus years later, thousands of children placed? Like, what did you think this journey was going to be like when you first got started?
No, I thought my husband and I might end up adopting one child. When I was a little girl, my parents had considered adopting after the war in Vietnam. This is how old I am. So they had considered adopting a child at that time. And so the idea of adoption was planted in my head. And so I thought, maybe we'll adopt one. And it never occurred to me that I would do anything other than just have a job and raise my kids, But the passion that you find in making a difference not just for your own kids and your own home and your own family, but for the ability to help someone else solve a problem and take the burden and make it lighter for somebody else. It's just, there's nothing like it. So no, I had no idea. And I had no idea what we built in this little one-stop shop would grow into this organization that we have now. I had no idea. And I could never have imagined it would be what it is.
How do you stay grounded in the sense of appreciation and gratitude for the impact that you're making, while also recognizing that as you guys continue to expand, there are more and more and more lives who need your support? Does it ever feel like there's a little bit of a dark side of the success and realization of how impactful you guys have been?
I think the hardest part of that is, I'm very much of an optimistic person. So for me, um, the hardest part of it is trying to figure out how we retain who we are as we grow. So, our organizational culture is really important to us. And when we were an organization of 3 people, and then an organization of 12 people, that was way different than an organization of 300 people. And so now it's how do we retain who we are in our direct connection to these kids and families in a way that is legit, is real and meaningful to them? How do we do that? How do we keep our focus where it needs to be on doing the right thing for kids and families and not get caught up in other drama? How do we maintain that organizational culture as we grow out? I'm not afraid of growth. I embrace growth and change, and I love to have opportunities to try to wrap my brain around, with the help of these amazing people that work with me, solutions to problems that we haven't found solutions for. That's fun for me. That like lights my soul on fire. But but how we keep people feeling uplifted and passionate along the journey with us, that keeps me up at night sometimes.
And what are some of the challenges that have come along with that process? From being a small shop of 3 to a team of 300, your skill set as a leader, I'm sure, has had to morph, change, adapt to meet the needs of the organization. So,
Oh
what are
yeah,
some of the hurdles that you've been able to overcome during this journey of growth?
so many. I mean, I didn't have a college degree when we started all of this. I had to go back and get my education while I was doing the work, learning about nonprofit management. I have had like a life lesson. I'm probably a doctorate in it now based on life. So many things, making mistakes and learning along the way. But I think the thing that has guided me through is just a sense of there, that no is the beginning of the story, of the conversation, if it's the right thing for a kid or a family. Like, so whatever the barriers are that are put in our way to doing the right thing, we will find a way to overcome those, go around them, under them, whatever we've got to do to get through those barriers. That sometimes when you're getting to the right place, people start pushing back, and that's when you face the most resistance. So recognizing that as progress rather than as a sign that it's time to quit, that's a big thing. Learning from the mistakes as you go. I'm a Viktor Frankl fan from way back. I truly believe that in the challenges is when you have the best opportunity to control your thinking and to choose to learn from those things and move forward. So, I mean, those are all some of the things we've had to overcome. Scaling everything, getting national accreditations and developing all of the processes and procedures, and then reminding everybody that we wrote those.
Yeah.
So if it's not working for us, we can actually change them. You know, every now and then you get people that are black and white thinkers, and you're like, yeah, if it's not
We
working,
can't redact this document. Well, we created this document so we can actually
it's our
do whatever we
document. We
want.
can change it. Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned something that I think is really important to double click on really quick, which was you mentioned the word control, right? When you are the founder, CEO, leader of an organization, often you have to play from your perspective of time in the future, right? I have to cast a vision for the future that other people are going to believe in. Like you said, often when you get close to those breakthroughs, you often get threatened with a breakdown. So, how do you control your inner world, your mindset, the way in which you hold confidence in yourself as you're going through some of these breakdown to breakthrough opportunities in your time here?
Um, I I just feel like in my actual life in raising my children, I have faced about every problem a human being can face. My husband and I didn't tell you this before, but two of our children had severe medical needs, and we ended up losing them 5 years apart from each other. They passed away. We have overcome so much in our real life in raising our kids with every kind of issue imaginable that there's nothing that happens at work that feels like big stuff to me. It's such a rare thing that there's anything that makes me go, oh my God, this is a problem we can't figure our way around. My first inclination is to bring together our leaders, who are all amazing, smart people on their own, and say, hey, here's the problem we have. What are we going to do about it? And then we sit around and we brainstorm. I am not a control freak. I'm the opposite of that. I do not believe I know everything or have the answer to everything. So if I can keep lighting the fire under people and encouraging their potential and their growth, man, they bring some wonderful solutions in sometimes when I don't have a clue where we're going to go next.
Man, Lori, that sense of perspective is so important. You know, so many of us get caught up in the idea that work is the end all be all, right? But then life has a way of showing you what's truly important and what actually matters. And I think a lot of people need to be tapped into that lifestyle or that mindset more so that like, hey, listen, this is just work. And being able to show up and provide services and support others is great, but it's not the most important thing in the world. You know what I mean? At the end of the day.
Yeah. And even that the work that we do is that level. I mean, it is important work. It's not like selling widgets at Walmart, right? It is that level of work, but also there's a solution. Like I truly believe that people who work in and around child welfare generally care about doing the right thing for kids. So the person sitting across from me may have a completely different perspective on how to get to the right thing for that kid. But if we can recognize in each other that we both care, then maybe we can find some compromise solution that gets us to where we need to be.
Oh man, I had a CEO on the podcast named Matt Perky who talked about the difference between differences and division. He said, when you have a team and you guys have differences in how you want to attack a problem, that's an awesome conversation because that gives us the ability to dive into different perspectives and ideas. Division on the other side is saying, no, we don't do things that way, and creating those hard boundaries, if you will, that stop collaboration ideas, which are often the best ones from coming to the top. And right. I think it's important to recognize that too.
100% agree with that.
How are you thinking about technology being able to impact this space? Because what we're really talking about is human services. We're talking about helping services, showing up, human connection to be able to support somebody else. Is there a role for things like artificial intelligence or technology in this service delivery? Or what are we thinking?
I don't know that we've thought our way around artificial intelligence yet. That's still new out there. But technology has definitely impacted things. For example, it makes things far more accessible to people no matter what their circumstances are. Like I don't think there's many human beings left in the United States of America who don't have a phone. And you know, your phone is basically a small computer. And so you can access people training information easily through that. And so getting word out to communities is immediate. It's easy. That has been a huge positive impact. One of the things we've struggled with, however, is not going too far that way. Like COVID, you know, everybody did their thing from home, and we're one of those organizations that we've come back. Like we can't lose our culture, and we recognize that we need to do this work together in community, in our organization, in all of our different locations. That's a necessary piece of it. But we also want to give people the flexibility that they need. And so we're balancing out, okay, how many days can we work from home where honestly you get so much more done because you're not getting interrupted 500 times versus how much time do we need to really be collaborative with the people that work with us. I do think having the internet did allow for more accountability too. But I'm also worried about the spread of misinformation that occurs as a result of the internet and people believing things that aren't real and watching all of that and responding to all of that.
The skill set of critical thinking is going to become a superpower in the future because there's a big difference that we see on social media today is back upon the before times, right? Authority was based on factual evidence and knowledge. authority today is often accused with popularity. Just because you have a message that goes viral online and gets a couple million likes, people think that that is the gospel, but it's not. We need to be critical thinkers about the information that we're being given. What's kind of going to happen over 2025 into 2026 with what you guys are doing with your organization? I want to give you an opportunity to kind of call what the next 12 and a half months look like for your guys' organization.
Well, more expansion. We have defined our service area, direct service area, as the states of Missouri and Kansas. So we are expanding geographically. We're almost fully around the areas we need to be in the state of Missouri, but we're growing in Kansas pretty significantly. We have brand new incoming legislators in both of our states and at the national level. So navigating the new direction that always occurs when there are changes in administration will help us to recognize what some of the challenges are going to be upcoming for our kids and families. We are looking forward to some collaborative projects within our community that address things like disproportionality in the number of kids that are in care in child welfare. Black and brown children are overrepresented in the foster care system. We'd like to do something about that. When you reduce the number of kids in care, addressing issues like that is a critical piece of it. So we have lots of good work to do moving forward. Yeah.
I mean, you guys are continuing to have an amazing impact, and it's easy to understand why I thought it would be such an amazing idea to have you on the podcast. You are the definition of heart and hustle, right? The heart that started this journey 25 plus years ago turned into the hustle to impact thousands of lives a year. And I hope that you have some time, Lori, to actually reflect on the gratitude of all the people who you've impacted across your lifetime, and all the people who have so much appreciation for the work that you do.
Thank you, Keenan. That's super nice. Someday I want to reflect on that on a beach with a pretty drink in my hand, but that's still a little ways off.
There you go. Well, part of our tradition on the podcast here is we love having our previous guest ask you a blind question. Now, this question is coming from a leader of an amazing human services organization out of Illinois. And he said, in a time of crisis or uncertainty, what does courage mean to you?
I think it means believing that there is a way through and seeking that out tirelessly until we find it. I think that is something that a lot of us are going to be dealing with as we're looking at the changes as a result of incoming new administrations. Recognizing right when it's right, seeing the crisis for what it is, and believing there's a way through and finding it, and not forgetting to still continue to do the right thing every single day. In my case, it will be because these kids' lives matter. Every life is valuable.
And Lori Ross, thank you once again for coming on the show. Everybody's tuning in, watching, and listening. Seriously, we cannot thank you enough for being the definition of heart and hustle. You are an amazing guest, and we can't wait to have you back on the show someday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Keenan.